Hey, good Friday morning, everybody. BAM weather meteorologist Brett Waltz here, giving you a long-range forecast update, guys. I hope you all are doing well this morning. We have a tricky forecast coming up as we start out October. A lot of that has to do with tropical activity, specifically in the Pacific Ocean. We're going to talk about that today. How does that actually impact our pattern, and what will it mean in terms of frost threats as we work into the early part of October? And what will it mean in terms of precipitation? It's gotten very dry. We've got some rain in the forecast. How will that trend as we get into the next month? Let's start here over the next couple of weeks, all the way through October 2nd. Just crazy to think about that we are already getting into October. Over the next 7 days, mild temperatures compared to normal continue across the Canadian prairies, northern tier of the US, and the eastern ag belt. However, we have this upper level low that's going to bring the rainfall chances back into the forecast. We'll bring some cooler air into the plains, and that will moderate our temperatures as we work into next week. We'll get rid of those 90-degree temperatures into the Ohio Valley and those upper 80s that have been exacerbating the drought conditions, and we'll get back still warmer than normal, but at least a little bit closer to seasonable levels for this time of the year. Heading into the week 2 time frame, guys, you can see overall mild, continuing to run warmer than normal. Not extreme, not expecting us to be 15 degrees warmer than normal, but a couple of degrees warmer than normal across the majority of the northern tier of the United States along the East Coast. Really, the only areas that are maybe a little bit more seasonable in the south central part of the country. In terms of rainfall, again, we've talked at length about this upcoming more active period. Really some beneficial rains coming for parts of Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky. I know it's harvest season, but the drought conditions are getting pretty bad. We're going to talk about that here in a moment. So the rain, just to help a little bit with that and some of the moisture levels along the Mississippi River, going to be very important as we get into next week. But I think that as we get into the last couple of days of September into October, the pattern turns drier again. Not getting a strong cold front in here, at least for now, like we had initially talked about a week or so ago. I think that the mild Pacific jet kind of preventing a connection to the colder Canadian and Arctic air. But the precipitation pattern is trending how we thought in terms of drier air coming back from west to east. That will bleed into the south into the east United States as we close out this month. In terms of those drought conditions, here is the latest look at that was updated yesterday morning. We actually have extreme drought conditions in effect across southeast Missouri, western Tennessee, bordering Arkansas and Tennessee as well, and then severe drought conditions in a pretty widespread area through parts of Illinois, Missouri, Kentucky, Arkansas, even a couple of spots here in Indiana, Illinois, and Ohio, guys. And you can see the moderate drought conditions expand all the way from Arkansas into the northeastern part of the country. Just pretty widespread drought conditions have developed over the past several weeks here in the United States. And of course, the western U.S. drought really has not gone away throughout the season as well. Here's a look at the changes over the past 8 weeks. And guys, this is the definition of a flash drought. Just over the past 4 to 8 weeks, it has gotten so dry in these areas. The heat has come back. This is a class 4 degradation, which just basically means that this area in here has gone from no drought to extreme drought in 8 weeks, and that does not happen very often. And so just again, continuing to see those drought conditions worsen, but there should be relief for these areas as we go throughout late this weekend and into next week. Let's kind of take you through. You can see the precipitation chances start messy, they start lighter. This is as we work into Monday. This is by Monday evening. You can see for the most part, not a ton of rain, but where things really begin to pick up is as we work into Wednesday, Thursday, and through the end of next week. And so it's really going to be not coming all at once. It's going to be multiple rounds of rainfall potential over the next 7 days that's going to produce this moisture. A couple of key notes that I want to make here. Number one, I think the corridor of the most widespread and the heaviest rain will be kind of through this area in here, which again, where some of the worst drought conditions have developed. Widespread totals of 1 inch plus in this region. Could be some spots that get 2 to 3, 4 inches of rain, especially in parts of southern Missouri, Oklahoma, maybe into southern parts of Illinois. Where I think the rain totals will be a little bit messier. You can kind of see the cutoff here. You're not dry, and I do think that maybe the GFS in here is a little bit too light in spots, but I wanted to highlight it because it shows the messy nature of things. With these upper level lows, there tends to be a messy component to rainfall totals. And so I do think the further north you go, the more likely that the totals verify a little bit messier. There can be some spots that get skipped out on the heavier rainfall totals. Again, maybe the GFS is a little bit too aggressive with seeing those gaps, but I do think that is the region where it will occur. I would highly encourage you all with these upper level lows. They're notoriously tricky, notoriously difficult to forecast, especially weather model data will be volatile over the coming days. Watch those local forecast videos. Be on the lookout for insights. Our team is, looking at the data and making adjustments as needed as we go throughout this weekend and into next week with this tricky setup. In terms of just the overall pattern evolution, guys, as we go over the next 2 weeks, I want to break this down for you all because we do have, again, more fall-like air, I suppose, coming in as we work into late next week. It's not going to be much below normal. It won't be as crispy, if you will, but that upper level low bringing in more seasonable conditions for this time of the year, maybe even some cooler conditions for the southern plains. Not looking at any kind of a big frost threat or anything like that with this because again, you can see the warmth tries to bleed back in. I do think there's a little front around the 29th, 30th of the month. You can see may briefly allow for those temperatures to cool down to seasonable levels, but it's not going to pack a punch. Again, the mild Pacific air, guys, it's just preventing a true tap to the colder air to the north as things stand right now. And then as we close out this time frame, you can see the warmth will build back in a pretty widespread fashion across the US. And so some weak fronts that will moderate things, but overall the milder pattern will be continuing over the next 15 days. With that being said, I do want to keep an eye on late the first week of October and into the second week of the month. There's a couple of things that I'm starting to notice that need to be monitored. I will say confidence very low right now for a number of different reasons because of some pattern driver discrepancies that we'll talk about, but also the typhoon activity. But I want to start here just because there is support from East Asia that between the 4th and the 9th of the month, the eastern U.S. could at the very least be more seasonable, with the core of the warmer air across the western half of the country. Along with that, and what I think will ultimately be the determining factor on if we do get a cold front and how strong the cold front could actually be, is West Pacific typhoon activity. There is a super typhoon right now moving towards China. That is going to keep the pattern warm out through the end of week 2. It's why I think the pattern warms back up in a big way as we close out the week 2 time frame, 1st, 2nd, 3rd of the month. Right after that is when we would potentially feel the influence of the second typhoon. There are major differences right now in model data and how this typhoon evolves. If we take a look here, the EPS has a lot of members that move it this direction and then kind of curve it around and recurve it near Japan. A strong super typhoon recurving near Japan in about 8-9 days' time. That would be a big cold risk to the forecast, especially to end the first week of October and into the second week of October. However, if we look at the American data, it's substantially different from what the EPS would indicate. It's much weaker, it's much faster, and not even all the members recurve. If we take a look here, I would say most of them are trying to recurve, which would at the very least favor some kind of a cold front down the road, but it's not a strong typhoon or a super typhoon either, if you will. So the influences would not be as intense. And then there's option number 3. If we take a look at the AIFS, it actually gets stuck with this system. It never moves it north, which would overall be a warmer risk. And so you have 3 very, very different solutions with this typhoon and potential implications for the US. And you may be wondering, why are you really spending so much time on this typhoon that's thousands and thousands of miles away from the United States? Well, the reason is because it directly impacts the jet stream and has a major implication on our pattern here in the United States, especially this time of the year. Guys, this time of the year, these typhoons can reorient the jet stream in a way that completely changes things up and means other pattern drivers don't work as well. And so I really want to focus in on it and try to figure out how this is going to evolve. Something we need to watch very carefully over the next couple of days. I would say, looking at everything and the general consensus, the GEFS is probably the most reasonable solution right now. It would be maybe a little bit of a weaker and a faster front, but it would support a front with this recurve. If the EPS obviously happens, that's going to be a much more powerful cold front possible as we close out the first week of October and into the second week of the month. But I think the GEFS, and as a result, what this East Asia signal has here, probably the more right idea for this time frame right now. I do want to show you the implications on model data itself as well, because I actually think the data is trying to pick up on this. If we look at the EPS, this is by the 5th of the month. It has what we call a ridge bridge, an area of warmth and high pressure extending all the way from the western US up to the Arctic and Greenland. This traditionally would favor a bigger blast of cold air across the eastern part of the country. The GEFS, while it certainly has the front, maybe a little bit faster, 3rd, 4th, 5th of the month or so, it does not have that ridge bridge. It has some warmth in the west, it has some warmth north, but you can actually see it keeps things cooler to more seasonable to the west, which means we don't have quite the tap to colder air that we would have. This would be a faster and a weaker cold front as we work throughout this time frame. It would be a quick moving, slightly below normal, normal fall front type of deal rather than a big, powerful front that produces 20 degrees below normal temperatures and widespread frost and freeze potential. That is along the lines of what we are thinking right now, but we have to watch how that typhoon will evolve. There's also other aspects that make the weeks 3 and 4 timeframe a little bit tricky. Our global wind state is very negative. It's been very negative. It continues to be very negative. That's very La Nina-like. And if you look at what the correlation favors as we work into October, it's a warm signal, especially east. In fact, I'd say it's the exact opposite correlation of what we just talked about that the typhoons would indicate. And so big conflicting signals there. At the very least, this would support that after that front, we're going to warm back up pretty quickly. If you take a look at 2024, this is the next 2 weeks last year, September 19th to 2nd, 2024. The reason I show this is it's been a very good analog lately. In fact, if you look at the next 2 weeks, it matches up nearly identically to how 2024 evolved. So how did that roll into the weeks 3 and 4 time frame? Warmth across the western and central US, more seasonable to slightly cooler further to the east. I actually think this is a very reasonable type of idea. I think ultimately we could end up averaging out somewhat like 2024 did. Obviously, again, pending what that typhoon recurve does. It matches up pretty well with the EPS weekly. I think the EPS weekly surface temperatures are not cold enough with its cold blast, its cold front, compared to what its upper level pattern looks like, but I think its surface temperatures might end up being somewhat reasonable given that fact. I don't think it's too far off overall. With all that in mind, here's how we average out. And I did something that I don't normally do with these weeks 3 and 4 outlooks. I left more room for equal chances in the southeast part of the country because it ultimately is just going to depend on how strong the front is related to the typhoon recurve. If the typhoon recurve trends stronger, this area, maybe even more, will be below normal for the weeks 3 and 4 time frame. Right now, favoring it to be a little bit weaker and for the warmth to move back in a more widespread fashion. The other pattern drivers in general favor milder conditions. I just want to keep an eye on that risk. Regardless, the confidence just because of that is going to be much lower than normal in this time frame. In terms of precipitation, favoring precipitation to average out drier than normal. No real changes here. If we go back to 2024, it was also very dry. Our weaker global wind state into October is a dry correlation. There's a lot of signals that support the drier than normal risk. I don't think it's bone dry, especially in the Midwest and the northern plains. If anywhere, that would be where there would be a wetter risk. But I think most can average out drier than normal. And one reason for that is because I think that tropical activity can actually be a little bit more active into early to mid-October. You can see that here. That's what this map is showing. However, because tropical forcing is a little bit more favorable right now, based off the current signals into October, however, if you look at climatology into October, in terms of tropical activity, it's very rare to get storms that go up into the Gulf and up into the Ohio Valley and lead to a lot of moisture in October. In fact, it just doesn't happen very often. The prevailing track would be that, yes, we could get maybe a storm that moves into the Gulf and it would recurve up the southeast coast or even up the east coast. If you think back to some storms that have happened in the past, Sandy is a great example of that. Typically, you get more of a recurve type of track into October, which would favor this drier risk as well. Guys, that's all I have for today's forecast. If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Have a great rest of your day.